Welcome to the Alpha Warrior Show. We're excited to share diverse perspectives and expert insights with you. Please note that the views and information expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Alpha Warrior Show, its management, or our partners. Each of our affiliates and sponsors and partnerships is a separate entity, and their opinions are their own. Today's content is provided for information and educational purposes and should not be taken as specific advice, whether it be financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your specific situation. We provide all information as is and encourage you to consult with a professional advisor to address your specific individual needs. Your use of any information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By listening further, you agree to identify and protect the Alpha Warrior Show and its associates from any claims or damages arising from your use of this broadcast content. Changes to this disclaimer may be made at any time and will be done effectively immediately upon posting or broadcasting. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you find the episode both informative and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
Well, how is it going, everybody? Mic check, Cujo. Am I 5x5? I hope so. If not, I'll be looking to the chat, Cujo. Don't wait 40 minutes this time. Guys, this is the Alpha Warrior Show. I am your host, Alpha. Operation Gladio, part 17. I know you guys are going to like that one. And we got some breaking information that the Colonel's going to share with us right when we get back after Alpha keeps the lights on with these two commercials. So let me get to the first one, you guys, because I know your patience is wearing thin because you want to get into the action. AlphaLikesGold.com. My partners over at Goldco, you guys. Be prepared. It's easy. It's fast. Rich are buying gold. I like the feedback you guys are giving me. So let's talk about this bank wipeout. Criminal tax hikes, hyperinflation, a full-blown recession. It's part of the grand plan. The billions of dollars Biden keeps sending that corrupt Ukraine, the trillions in new taxes he wants to shove down our throat, the electronic banking system crash, resetting everybody to zero, checking accounts, savings accounts, 401ks, IRAs, all of it zero. But we don't have to be victims. Protect your money and get up to $10,000 worth in free silver to do it when you call my partners at Goldco. Links down in the description. Goldco's help protect over $2 billion in gold and silver for people like you and me. And like I said, they're offering up to $10,000 in bonus silver when opening a qualified IRA account just for being a supporter of this podcast. So whether you want to protect 50 grand or a $500,000 or more, this is your opportunity to protect yourself from the out of control, very corrupt government. Yes, I'm talking about the Biden regime. And go visit alphalikesgold.com. And then our next commercial, and then we're getting into this. America's favorite mustache, as always, Mr. Landau. And we'll be back in a moment.
I'm excited to announce we're having a huge MyPillow spring sale. And here's a few examples. Buy one of our MyPillow 2.0s, you get another MyPillow 2.0 absolutely free. Made with cooling technology, the best pillow ever just got even better. And this just in, 9 brand new colors and styles of our Percale bed sheets. They're made with the finest long staple cotton, and now you can save 50% or more. That's as low as $24.98. And for the first time this year, I'm bringing you our My Slippers and Sandals for as low as $25 a pair. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get your MyPillow 2.0s. Buy one, get one free. Percale sheets as low as $24.98. My Slippers and Sandals as low as $25 a pair. And for a limited time, when you order $75 or more, your entire order ships absolutely free.
Absolutely free. My Pillow, my store, promo code Alpha works at both of those, and Goldco, alphalikesgold.com. You guys, if you don't know, down in the description, all the links to follow tonight's guest, Colonel Towner. But in all the shows I do, all the links are there to follow my guests, as well as find the Alpha store, which is the alphawarriorshow.tv, or the links that we show that we're going to be bringing up on the screen during the show. So everything you want down in the description, you guys. So go check that out. Give me your feedback. If it's too complicated, I'll simplify it. But if this Marine can create it, y'all better be able to use it. So let's bring the woman you guys really want to hear from tonight. Supermodel Colonel Towner is in the house. How are you doing, ma'am?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually really good, Colonel. Like, yeah,
Awesome.
I'm especially considering what we talked about last week. Like, I'm fired up. Like, it's kind of like, like they poke the Marines and it's just like, like
It's like somebody poking in your chest.
it is. It's like, you know what? Let's
Don't
get these. Don't do that. Let's. But just like the audience, I look forward to Wednesdays to just to learn more and to make more sense out of what's going on. But you got some breaking info.
So here's what I want to say to everybody who, like me, at one of my old friends used to say, if you're like me, and I know I am, when you first come across Operation Gladio, you just cannot believe it's real. And I think I've done a fairly good job of kind of breaking it down to some fundamental parts about the international syndicate being kind of the puppet master, and the CIA basically being the paramilitary through NATO that did not only Operation Gladio throughout Europe, but also brought it over into South America and Central America under Operation Condor. And we've talked about the School of Americas and the whole structure. So someone just sent me minutes ago a article yesterday. A court in the United States has found multinational fruit company Chiquita Bananas, and you will remember that under its previous name, United Fruit, guilty of financing a Colombia paramilitary group. And remember, paramilitary is kind of one of those keywords like anti-communist, being kind of a code word for Operation Gladio operatives. And it basically says that Chiquita Bananas was paying off one of those cells called United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia. And in this article, it's amazing the detail in which it talks. So it says a civil case filed by 8 Colombian families who obviously had people murdered by this paramilitary group that Chiquita Banana was funding was awarded $38 million as a result of the wrongful deaths. And it was a jury verdict. And it says, the jury in the case, which was heard in federal court in South Florida, found Chiquita Banana responsible for the wrongful deaths of 8 men. There's so many more. They engaged in widespread human rights abuses in Colombia, including murdering people. It's suspected with left-wing ties to rebels. And it also says that the victims or their targets were trade unionists, which of course trade unionists would have been basically unionizing against Chiquita Banana or United Fruit. The case was brought by the families after Chiquita had pled guilty in 2007 to making the payments. And in the 2007 trial said that they had made payments to this terrorist group to $1.7 million. And unfortunately, the crux of this case was that this AUC had actually been added to the terror list in the United States, which basically made it illegal for those payments to be made. But this wrongful death thing is kind of separate from that as well, but it's what gave them the courage to do it, I guess. The problem that everybody else in the world that's had people killed by the CIA and working on behalf of these international syndicate companies is that so Chiquita says they're going to appeal this. The only way, and this has actually worked in other countries, the only way that they could get out of this settlement is if they say they were doing it in collusion with the CIA. That's actually worked in other countries. So, and we'll get into some aspects of that tonight, but these weapons dealers that have been caught selling weapons, when they sold the weapons on behalf of the, with the knowledge of the government, then they threw the court case out against them. So wouldn't that be something?
That would definitely be something. So I would be looking to see if people all of a sudden start having accidents in the Chiquita administration.
Right. So it also says here, there was one part that I wanted to make sure everybody, so they understand what this is saying. Regular payments continued even after it was designated a foreign terrorist organization in 2001. While the AUC claimed to have created, it had to have been created to defend the landowners from attacks. Now, keep in mind who the landowners are. These landowners got land through crooked deals that Chiquita, they're like the old-fashioned plantation overseers, right? So these aren't just like landed gentry that land had been in their families for hundreds of years. These are people that basically the CIA and these international syndicate companies had actually kind of set up in these sweetheart deals, so they know they had bought them so that they're not going to turn against them, either unionize or whatever. So it says that they were defending these landowners from attacks and extortion attempts from quote unquote left-wing rebel groups. And again, it's the labeling. So they're communists, so it's okay to kill them. The paramilitary group more often acted, listen to this, as a death squad for drug traffickers. So they're laying it all out. And that is exactly what was going on. At the height, it's estimated 30,000 members were engaged in this intimidation, drug trafficking, extortion, forced displacement, and killings. So
30,000?
So right now, and this, there's 20,000 right now. There was a recent article that I exposed that said there are 20,000 basically trained assassins on call right now in Colombia, and they're RENA assassins to NATO and to the UN. They'll deploy all over the world. They're actually like manufacturing. And the problem with this is that these people were trained using SOCOM's mill-to-mill money with Colombia. So, every joint command gets money budgeted for military to military exchanges in country where, like CENTCOM, obviously our AOR was the Middle East. So we'd go to Kenya, and because at the time we had Africa too. But we would go to Saudi, Bahrain, wherever, and we'd do military to military training. But in South America and Central America, those budgets were being used to what the military people thought was train people, because we were all told the people that were like attacking the landowners were communist. They were, left-leaning crazy people that were trying to take over the country, when that's not what they were at all. The country and the CIA had basically set this entire fake system up where they were running drugs and had paid off everybody in the corridor. And the military was going down there, unbeknownst to them, the special forces, and training the paramilitary capability to enable the CIA's drug running. And they didn't even know they were doing it. It's the same setup with the Contras, because as a matter of fact, United Fruit was the big bad guy in Nicaragua and Guatemala and Cuba. So the repercussions of this one court case is huge, especially for the CIA.
I want to see snitches. And so my phone is blowing up and the chat is blowing up and everybody has the same question. Is this live? We are live tonight, you guys. So this is real time what's going on. So you guys want to get
and thank God it is, because we wouldn't even have that information that just came in.
Which is very cool. And we both like doing the live. So
yeah,
this is big. I hope that this starts a movement, because here's the thing: there's other people out there that are victims of other, whether it be NGOs or other corporations or shell companies, that they're watching this. And if we can show that these victims can not only win but stay alive with the win, I think that might motivate some other people to be like, maybe it's time for us to, go.
Yeah. So obviously Chiquita banana is a big one, because the United Fruit was so prevalent in the Central and South America. However, you have companies like ITT that paid to have the revolution in Chile, where, I don't know, 100 or a couple 100,000 people died through torture and disappearance. You also have mining companies all over that paid millions of dollars to these paramilitary entities to break up union efforts. In one of the stories I did in one of the countries, they were making $87 a year and tried to unionize to get better wages. I think it was Uruguay. And were murdered as a result of that.
How do you even survive with that kind of income? I mean, I get it. We're dealing with, stuff like, pesos and things like that. But even then, that is insignificant when it comes to the amount of money.
Yeah. And then kill them because they wanted more wages. As you're living in your 100,000 square foot mansion, in upstate New York. It's the entire thing's just appalling.
It is.
But this is like a light switch going on. And kudos to those brave people and to the court. They did what was right. So our justice system isn't bad all the time.
Every now and then we get
Every now and then. I'll take my wins where I can get them.
Oh man, I have been making people mad.
I'm going to do one more transition. I put a thread out there on the 30th of May. I just reposted it, so it'd be easy to find on my X at Colonel Towner. It was talking about an article that appeared on the 10th of May. Again, another very recent article, which reveals a very familiar pattern that I have been noticing with the U.S. and Israel. This particular article dealt with the Guatemala coup, CIA activity, Operation Condor, 1974 to 1996. And it's also a pattern that repeated itself in Panama, Nicaragua, and other Latin American countries. And it dealt with a retired Guatemalan general that was on trial in Guatemala City for genocide at the behest of the CIA, the US military, and weirdly enough, Israel. And I was not aware. I have heard, like in Panama, there was a guy there that was kind of like Noriega's right hand that was Mossad. So I'm very aware that there was some Israeli presence in that area, but it kind of was here and there in a story, and there didn't seem to be any coalescing as to what was it a rivalry? Were they trying to move in on the CIA's territory? You know what I mean? It was kind of up in the air. So I didn't think too much about it, because generally the patterns, if they're going to be a pattern, they'll keep coming up. So I don't dwell on any one as I'm going through all of these different countries and kind of laying out the scenarios in each one of them. So they talk about the horror of what they experienced. And this guy that's on trial is like 91 years old now. I mean, he's really old. And it says, again, a common theme with United Fruit / Chiquita Banana, he ran the war against his own population, this general that's on trial, on behalf of the CIA and United Fruit, which is the international syndicate. But they were actually armed by Israel. And I thought, that's really weird, because this is the first article I've come across where it actually specifically talked. I've heard lots of stuff about our military training, these paramilitary people down here. But it never occurred to me we would be training them using another government's weapons. That just seems so weird to me. And so it says from 1960 to 96, over 200,000 Guatemalans were murdered or disappeared. 93% were murdered by the state officials, armed, trained, and equipped by the CIA, the US military, and Israel. And it says another 7% were killed by the freedom fighters. So you had like 7% killed by the people trying to free their government from the CIA installed dictator, and 93% killed by the CIA or their trained stooges. And then it says, I go on and I talk about how there's this company that was set up to actually manufacture weapons in Central America. And I'm like, that's totally weird. And it's an Israeli company. And I'm like, well, but we're spending money both in the country, like Guatemala, mill to mill, that I was just explaining, and all the surrounding countries. So like El Salvador, we had training sites set up, in Honduras and in Guatemala and in Costa Rica, where we were launching missions into Nicaragua to take down this government, and then to take down the rebel forces, which were the good guys. And it says, after the CIA coup, young officers rebelled in 1960 when the Guatemalan president at the time, a general, allowed Washington to train fighters for the Bay of Pigs invasion on a local plantation. And of course, I referenced the fact that's that Felix Rodriguez guy that Tucker Carlson, he actually admitted he was one of the people in Honduras doing this training, and in Guatemala and in El Salvador.
Tucker had no idea how close he was to some danger.
I'm telling you. Yeah, I still say I'd have fired my entire security team after that interview, but that's just me. So anyway, as you go down through this article and the revelations here, we get to the part where this Israeli company, not just in Panama, or it's Galil, Galil, assault rifles. And then I noticed, which is going to come out tonight, it's talking about Uzis. And those happen to be, which we're going to learn tonight, manufactured and sold by Israel from South Africa during apartheid. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, because that's a very interesting story that I did not know. But after I came across this article, I had not spent too much time as we went country by country by country. I've kind of focused on the opium and the drug trafficking. So you go back to our wheel of Operation Gladio with human trafficking, arms trafficking, and drug trafficking. And that's how they pay for the entire operation, and they grease it with blackmail. So most of the articles that I've come across do not talk a lot about the arms dealers. We do have some, like that Warbell guy that was the silencers on the automatic up in Georgia. So where I have found them, I've done a little bit of digging into who they are. And Aiden Khashoggi comes up often, as he will in this story too. So those people I kind of know, but I didn't tie all of these back to Israel. And Israel ends up being kind of a big arms trafficker. And what's really weird about this from an American standpoint, so I want to point this out. Here we are in America. Here's Israel. And let's say this is Colombia, which we were just talking about, or Nicaragua or Guatemala or whatever. There's so many over in this category. So I'm sending billions of dollars every year to Israel for military support. I'm sending billions of dollars all over the world to support mill to mill, military to military exchanges, right? Now, if I'm sending millions to Colombia, and I'm sending billions to Israel, and Israel takes $1 billion and goes, let's just say 500 million, and goes and builds a factory in Colombia or Guatemala or Nicaragua, and is producing weapons used to kill the good guys and aid the CIA. Do you see a problem with that?
I do.
Because, okay, so I just gave them the money to buy it. I gave them the money to manufacture it. They're making a profit. They have a bunch of dead bodies. And we have a lot of debt.
Colonel.
Because none of that's real money.
Oh my gosh. I'm beside myself right now. Something just clicked in my head. So you guys are going to get a little sneak peek into Monday's podcast. So this weekend, I got to interview JJ Carroll. For those of you that are not familiar with them, 20 plus years in Border Patrol as a supervisor, just a phenomenal human being that's like full throttle. Like the dude is not afraid to call out treason. And he disclosed some things in the interview this weekend that he hasn't said yet. But you're talking about that money. And he dropped some numbers on me, Colonel, that I was like, wait, what? He goes, fact check me. I'm like, so this border crisis at our southern border through NGOs, specifically Jewish Family Services. Long story short, there's a lot here, and that's a whole. You guys are gonna have to wait a few days for the whole thing, but we're over $1 trillion that's been used into these migrants. So one of the things he told me, and this comes directly from his source, who's I gotta be careful because I don't know if that's something he shared offline or online. So from a source that has, you saw how quick I was like, pump the brakes on that one. Take them off the screen. From a source he has information that there's these checks being written to Jewish Family Services, for example, and this is a real number, $600 million check gets sent to Jewish Family Services, one check, because there's an emergency scenario going on. This stuff's going on, right? And then Jewish Family Services is supposed to kind of, disseminate that amongst the NGOs that fall under the umbrella of it. However, then those specific NGOs that fall under the JFS umbrella all of a sudden start calling the organization entity that's writing these checks saying, hey, we need this. Well, because everything's been called exigent, exigent circumstances, there's no time to say, well, we already sent the check to Jewish Family Services. You need to contact them. They just write them a check. And nobody's auditing it, Colonel. It's money laundering.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's the same thing that's going on.
Billions. The billions. So now you can give this money to everything that you're talking about here.
But it's not even money. It's debt. It's debt. We have no money. It's debt for our great grandkids. You have a Federal Reserve that is sending out IOUs that you won't be able to pay back. I won't be able to pay back. My kids can't pay them back, and my grandkids won't be able to pay them back. And I wanted to point out that whole round robin. So the only people that get screwed in this deal is us repeatedly and the dead people, right? So everybody that's in this mechanism is getting rich. Because what I didn't mention is everybody gets a slice. So when I send the money to Israel and they wink, wink and say, yeah, I'm getting this money, but I know it's not just for my military expenditures, because I'm basically money laundering this into the Contras because your Congress said you're not allowed to send the money to the Contras anymore. And so I'm going to do this for you, and I'm going to get the profit on building my factory over there. Plus, I'm going to send all the Jewish people over there, the Israelis, to work in my factory. So they all have jobs. And F you, America, I just took all your jobs because we're not buying M16s and you're not making them. So in every sense of the word, we're screwed. We get the debt. We don't get the profit. We get nothing except for screwed. Because what's going to happen whenever these countries come and sue every one of these multinational, international syndicate companies? Well, they're all going to go down the tubes. But do you know where their headquarters are? Right here in the United States. And you know who's not going to have a job when they get screwed? The people right here in the United States. So there's a reckoning coming, and it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people here. The whole world's going to be better off, but it is going to be a whole lot of reckoning coming down the road. So,
well, real quick, one of the cool things, since we are live right now, is I can read these Rumble rants as they come in. So Talk with Sally just dropped us a $5 Rumble rant. She says, it's not much, but I appreciate you guys. It's a lot because you took the time to do it. So it's very much appreciated. Talk with Sally. And she has a podcast, you guys. And she's also been covering the Gladio stuff. So you guys make sure and you go and support these people that are willing to bring this information to us. But all right, Colonel, tell me where we're going.
Sally helps out a lot on our daily show that we've been doing that I've skipped the last couple of days since I'm on vacation. But here I am tonight.
This wasn't a Rumble rant, but this is a question, and it comes from a friend that I really care about. Ash 1776, fellow Badlander. She says, Colonel, what's the role of corporations in the Gladio model? And have you dug into the role, if any, of the professional services firms, audit and consulting?
So, back at the very beginning of this series, and I would highly encourage you to go watch number 1. We talked about the whole schematic of the operation. I refer to all of the professional level entities in Operation Gladio as the international syndicate. They're the puppet masters. So the corporations, the international corporations, the politicians, the bankers, the corrupt elements of the different religions, like the Vatican money laundering apparatus. Those are all what I refer to as the international syndicate. That like the higher ups in them. So they basically buy the politicians, they install the presidents in these different countries, because the CIA isn't just going and picking somebody that they like. They're being told to create the chaos when the international syndicate decides they don't like the guy that got elected, or he's fallen out of favor, whatever. So the PR, one of the major elements of this that I have noticed, again, another pattern, is there's a lot of PR firms, and the PR firms basically do write the scripts for the media. They're like the propagandists. They're the Bernays trained element that kind of is, it's like if you were in a symphony, it's the person that writes the music for everybody to play. The Price Waterhouses, those kinds of professionals, they actually went in and falsely audited banks' books, and the bank, like within 30 days of it being signed off as perfectly fine, that was doing all the money laundering, like BCCI, every single one of them, bar none, that I have found and looked into at any depth, were all had hired Price Waterhouse as the one that certified their financial statements, and they did so knowing that they were grossly incorrect. And then, like I said, within, in some cases, 30 days, a bank would fail after having just gotten flying colors from Price Waterhouse. So all of those are part of the international syndicate that without all of them, none of this would work. Did that answer it?
It made sense to me. And
Okay.
for those that are wondering, I made it easy. You go down the description, you'll see Gladio, Operation Gladio series. It's the playlist. You click that link and it brings up all the Gladio shows that we did in order for you guys. And they're all titled, so it makes it really easy to go through and find the topic.
And the first one is very important if you haven't watched it, just because it kind of sets the context for everything that we talk about. And it's very important to understand the terms and how some of them have been manipulated over the years. I tried to go through and kind of define all of that. Okay, so
I remember that first episode. I remember the talk leading up to it, and laying out the the verbiage to understand it. But I remember that conversation of, we can't do this in one or two shows. Like this was going to be a mission, and just to see what it's grown into and the conversations that are being had is just so freaking awesome.
and what is happening in the real world as it unfolds, right? Just like this court case, it just comes, it just happened. And we have talked ad nauseum, not only about Colombia and their 20,000 trained rent-a-cops that they put out for NATO and the UN to use. It's a real thing right now. They're still doing it. So, and then to see something like that where it happens in real time as you're kind of exposing the whole thing, it's mind-blowing. And that's not the first one that's happened. There's been other ones that's come up during this process of exposure that kind of concretes for us that what we're doing and what we're exposing here is no kidding real, and that there is going to be accountability to some extent. So
I like it.
All right. So that prompted me when I found that information about to do you know what commitment you have to and how long this has gone on? If you could manufacture Galil weapons in Israel and you could just export them, right? Why would you go to the trouble of setting up a manufacturing plant in Central America? That's kind of a long-term commitment. Why would you do that? So I got to thinking, well, if they're going to build entire manufacturing capability in Central America, somebody must have told them we're going to overthrow a whole bunch of governments. Oh, and they must know all about the drug trade because you're going to need lots of weapons for that. You know what I mean? They can't just have just decided that for a temporary skirmish of a couple of years of an overthrow that you would go to the trouble of building an entire manufacturing arms plant, not just the guns, but the ammunition too. So I'm like, I better look into that. I'm going to look around and see if I can't find anything else about Israel as an arms dealer. So I come across a couple of different things. And one of the very first things I came across was Israel Aircraft Industries. And it played a role in creating something called a cheetah. And they did it out of, it's kind of like a rebirth of a Mirage aircraft. And I knew that that was something that had a long time ago on a different project that I worked on to do with South Africa. And I'm like, well, that's really weird. How did Israel have anything to do with South Africa? So that was a question I probably shouldn't have asked myself, because what I come across is a London Sunday Times article, October 5th, 1986, that talked about Israel's nuclear capability and the information provided by a disaffected Israeli technician by the name of Mordecai Banunu, who had worked at the Israeli secret plutonium plant in an underground facility in Negev, Negev, which I recognized immediately from our USS Liberty show, because that's where the nuclear facility is that everybody was talking about during the 6-Day War in 1967. And that it went on to say the account astonished leading nuclear scientists, some of whom had been called in to challenge Vanunu to verify his photos that he had smuggled out of Israel to see if what he was saying was actually true or not. They were forced to revise their estimates upward and declare Israel to be the world's 6th largest nuclear power. Now, this is back in 1986. And you hear people talk today like they're still speculating, they've never acknowledged that they even have a nuclear program. And yet it's on the front page of the Sunday London Times in 86 that they are the 6th largest nuclear power. Over the years, bits and pieces of Israel's nuclear program have emerged, a series of tests on weapons and delivery systems with the French in Algeria. And I'm like, what? Because all part of Operation Gladio in Algeria, where Otto Skorzeny actually goes from Spain to Algeria, because the whole big fiasco in Algeria was they wanted their freedom back in the 60s, around the same time that they murdered Lumumba. And France, Charles de Gaulle wanted to grant them freedom. JFK wanted them to have their freedom. And there were militant parts, primarily Operation Gladio units, that did not want to give up Algeria because of a lot of resources that Algeria had. And so they deployed Operation Gladio cells from the OAS, which was like the French Foreign Legion and their secret service, that they were basically banned because they tried to kill Charles de Gaulle several times. They go down and basically start fighting a civil war in Algeria. And so as soon as I saw that, I'm like, is that the reason why those people didn't want to give up Algeria? Because they were doing nuclear tests there too, because they've got a big desert area. And I'm like, well, that's really weird. And then it says the Parrain, who was in charge of the French Atomic Nuclear Agency, recently admitted that, recently being back when this article was written, that France built Israel the nuclear reactor at Negev. And I'm like, France gave Israel all of the stuff to build their nuclear reactor for their nuclear program. I'm like, okay. And then it also says between 57 and 59, the two governments had been working together on an atomic bomb. Huh. And then in 1965, just after the plant came online, there was 130 pounds of enriched uranium that was missing from NUMEC, which is a U.S. entity plant, which the CIA believed was largely financed by Israel.
Is this the story where there were some independents that went and tested, I think, the soil or dirt around that Israeli plant?
So well, what I just said was in Pennsylvania, there was an entity there that had nuclear material stolen from it. And yes, at some point, there were people that were trying to sneak into Negev and actually test the soil to see if it was contaminated with nuclear, but they didn't test it there. We're going to get to where they tested it in a minute because it's going to blow your mind.
Okay.
However, we in the United States had enriched uranium that was stolen from us. And it's largely suspected that it was stolen by Israel to basically take to this nuclear plant that they had built. So it also says this was done in preparation for a nuclear-tipped Jericho missile for use in the early days of the Israel's 1973 war, a joint program with Iran under the Shah to build a test long-range nuclear-capable missile. So now let that sink in for just a second. Remember, we overthrew the government and installed the Shah. So the Shah is a CIA guy, right?
Correct.
So we've got the CIA basically running Iran and Israel working together to create a nuclear-tipped missile.
Now, with that, I'm going to throw a little fringe ideas in here. We just had the Iranian president that died in a helicopter crash, because that's just going to happen to the leader.
Endings,
right? Right. And because of that, for those that don't know, that means Iran has to have special elections within 50 days. So that puts them at having an election before we have our election. Now, there's a former president of Iran that had filed to run for presidency in this election coming, coming whenever Iran's normal scheduled election was going to be. This particular guy, and I'll go look up his name and I'll add it to the links, but he is very anti-Israel. He's of the mentality of like, let's just nuke them. Like that's where he's at. So I just find it very interesting that this guy gets, I'm just going to say it, CIA takes out the Iranian president. That's alpha speculation here. But now these special elections are going to take place before our elections, where this other guy who's already been the president of Iran once, if he becomes the president, all of a sudden now you have someone that can give Bibi in Israel legitimate optics of, hey, we have a real threat now. We can escalate things. What I'm saying is, this looks like they're putting the chess pieces in play to have that threat of a nuclear
Showdown.
war. Yes.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
showdown. So it says that the test with South Africa of a nuclear missile in the South Atlantic in September 1979, and reports in 1985 that Israel had deployed nuclear-armed Jericho 2 missiles in the Negev desert, perhaps also in the occupied Golan Heights area. So there's a lot right there. So I'm going to go into a little bit more depth, but basically Israel became an arms dealer to South Africa during the whole apartheid government, where everybody put restrictions on dealing with South Africa. Israel ignored all of that and basically was kind of the middleman for people to still deal with South Africa through Israel. And Israel act as a port on the way out of South Africa to supply people with South Africa made weaponry, only basically stamped it as Israel when it was in fact made, and everybody knew that it was being made in South Africa. And the Israel did that because South Africa in return allowed Israel to test nuclear weapons off the coast and in the desert of South Africa. Is that crazy?
I'm going to pull that up right now too.
So basically it says there were reports over a period of 30 years that in October 5th, 1986 story, which for the first time portrayed all of the megatonnage of Israel's disposal and described in the words of a leading nuclear scientist, Israel's ability to produce sophisticated thermonuclear warheads did not rouse much reaction from the disarmament activists or from most Western governments. A report by a small newsletter that South African scientists had habitually worked at the secret plant was put on the desk of every Congress member, and it was ignored. Had it not been for the continuing drama surrounding the fate of Mordecai Benunu, the whistleblower, the matter might have completely been forgotten. On September 30th, 1986, he disappeared in London. The following November, the Israeli government announced that it had him in custody and would try him for treason and espionage. Benunu later made it known to journalists that he had been kidnapped in Rome. Although smeared by the Israeli media as a traitor and a money-grubbing opportunist, through a hunger strike and messages delivered through his lawyer, a friend, and his brothers, Benunu contended that he had acted out of principle, and it sparked Israel's first ever anti-nuclear effort. Support for him began to grow in the United States. Also in October 1986, a U.S. mercenary was captured when Nicaraguan soldiers shot down a plane in which he had been ferrying arms to the anti-Nicaraguan Contras. The admission made by the loadmaster, Eugene Hassenfuss, to the press in Nicaragua sparked investigations that revealed a network of high U.S. officials and former military and intel officers put together to circumvent the will of Congress and aid the Contras. It soon... Go ahead.
We covered that flight crash.
We did. Yes. It soon emerged. I'm just doing it now from the other side because I didn't know Israel was involved.
That's why I'm like, wait, what? Hold on. I was like, that sounds familiar. Like we've talked about.
Yes.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. It soon emerged that financing for the supply operation, it had been called, with a wink and a nod, private aid, had been obtained by shaking down Egypt and Israel for kickbacks on their U.S. aid. Even greater amounts of money had been squeezed out of Saudi Arabia as an expression of thanks for administration support of the kingdom's purchase of aircraft against the wishes of the pro-Israeli lobby in Congress in 1981. The Hassan Fuss scandal was soon transcended by the discovery that Israel had led a small group within the Reagan administration into a complicated deal where Israel sold U.S. arms to Iran, and this is the whole Iranian Contra thing. So Israel was all tied up in that as well. They were basically the weapons dealer. And that part I knew, but I didn't tie it back to all of the other weaponry that was throughout Latin America. So basically, they make the point that in the rush to pin all of this on Reagan and Lieutenant Colonel North, Israel got kind of purposely left out of the whole picture. And then it talks more about the actual coup that had happened there in Guatemala, and says that the plans to do it was so secret that by one account, the U.S. embassy was taken by surprise. And then it goes on to say that basically all of the there was Israeli advisors all over the ground in Guatemala, as well as the CIA, and that Rios Montt, who was a Protestant evangelical affiliate with the U.S. fundamentalist sect, the first non-Catholic head of state in Guatemala's history, and during his tenure, right-wing fundamentalists from the U.S. flooded into the Highlands area and began to take an active part in the pacification activities underway there. In 1983, Montt was overthrown by officers offended by the aggressive and fanatic religious groups, which had access to high levels of his government. He was spirited away to Miami by an Israeli advisor. Both Israel and right-wing U.S. Christians continue to work in the resettlement program, where the Mayan Indians, that basically a lot of them got killed, were still operating on the ground there, and they were trying to give relief efforts to feed them. And it also says in each of these instances, Israel acted under its own foreign policy for the sake of its own objectives. Yet in all of these instances, they are not selective, but rather illustrative of the many occasions on which Israel has intervened in the course of another nation's history, and both the U.S. was party to the Israeli actions as well. It also says that Israel's presence in Guatemala cannot be divorced from the intertwining of the CIA's overthrowing the elected government there, and that there were multiple aircraft and tanks that were sent there from Israel, and many of them had actually originated from South Africa. And basically, they were doing that in exchange for Israel being able to test their nuclear weapons down there. So it's kind of a crazy, weird thing to see this from the weapons part of this because I hadn't really done that much research into that. And it says, so this irony, yet another turn, is to show the correlation between progressive foreign policy achievements and Israelis' intervention. And when Congress pressed by constituents, our Congress, to cut off aid to the anti-Nicaraguan Contras, Israeli aid to the Contra mercenaries increased. So it's as if we're using Israel as an arms depot, that if Congress gets in the way of what we want to do, we just use Israel as kind of the bypass. You definitely go ahead.
So would that principle apply to the nuclear tests that they did? Because I found a couple articles on that, where they're talking about the double flash, and they're talking. I mean, there's a lot on that. But if we're using, okay.
So what Israel did with South Africa is they said, I'm going to help you out and you're going to help me out. I want a nuclear program. I need a place to test it, because if I test it in my neighborhood, I'm going to get told on. So I have to test it somewhere else and hide it. And so South Africa says, hey, I got a big backyard back here that's full of water, and nobody's going to see you testing that crap in my backyard. However, I'm under sanction by every country known to man because I'm a bunch of racist. I can't think of a nice word to say, but anyway, I'm very, very, very racist, and nobody wants to talk to me right now because it's politically incorrect to do so. And so I need weapons. And Israel says, well, guess what? I'm an arms dealer, and I'm using all of the aid from America to build up my arms factory. So I got lots of arms to sell you. And so it's as if we're giving Israel money for them to be our arms dealer to avoid people knowing that we're selling arms. And don't tell me that the CIA didn't know that Israel was selling arms to South Africa, and they could have just cut them off if they wanted to, because they could have, and they didn't. So we're using Israel. Our government will go, I'm going to sanction South Africa because you're racist. But hey, Israel, if you do that and you give them arms and you use the money that, here, let's increase your budget a little bit, and then you give some of this crap to South Africa because I can't do it directly. And the same thing with the Contras. Okay, all of a sudden, Congress got in my way and I can't give them weapons. But hey, Israel, hint, hint, I'm going to put your budget up a little bit, and I want them to have weapons. So do you see that? Israel is our weapons dealer.
And here's, you always look at when people won't come out and say that they know they're doing something wrong, but they know they're doing something wrong. I mean, the whole buildup of what you just explained with them going to South Africa to make this collaboration take place shows, nefarious intentions. But in this part, and like I said, you guys, if you joined late, all the links to the stuff that we bring up on screen will be down in the description for you guys to look into it further. But let me just read this part real quick. It's only a few sentences. Reed has written that he believes that the Vila incident was an Israeli neutron bomb test. The test would have gone undetected, as the Israelis specifically chose a window of opportunity when, according to the published data, no active Vila satellites were observing the area. Although the decade-old Vila satellite had detected the blast was officially listed as retired by the U.S. government, it was still able to receive data. Additionally, this is the part that I found interesting. The Israelis chose to set off the test during a typhoon. By 1984, according to Vanunu, Israel was mass producing neutron bombs. Mass producing. And, why would you do such a dangerous test in such, dangerous, inclement weather? I mean, it just...
don't want anybody to catch you doing it.
But that is dangerous.
They don't care. They kill hundreds of millions or hundreds of thousands of people in these coups. Danger to who?
Yeah, very
And
true.
as a matter of fact, there were sheep that were as far off as Australia that had increased signs of radiation poisoning as a result of that test. And it basically went without anybody ever saying anything about it.
Go figure.
I read that. Yeah. So, yeah, this was just mind-boggling to me. So, let me get
how can people think that Israeli intel doesn't have its claws in American government when every instance that involves the Israeli government, we're covering it up?
Correct.
I mean, come on, you guys.
Correct. Every part of it. And the same was true with that test, right? Because we knew as soon as it went off that it went off. And then we basically played footsies with them for years, going along with their, lie that they didn't have nuclear weapons. So listen to this one. This is dated 2007. A week after gunmen broke into South Africa's most secretive nuclear facility, shot a man, and tried to steal a computer, the nation's government remains mostly mum about the incident, the New York Times reports. According to the Times account, just after midnight on November 8th, a guy was sitting with his fiance. What his fiance is doing at a nuclear site, I don't know. In a control room where the nuclear reactor was in South Africa, and says that the nation's apartheid government conceived and delivered 6 atomic bombs when 4 gunmen burst into the room. And basically, they shot the guy. They didn't kill him. He did survive. His girlfriend was under the desk where they couldn't see her. And this happened at a couple of different sites for South Africa. And these are the people that Israel is dealing with in the proliferation of nuclear weapons. You're like, are you kidding me right now? And they never caught the guys. They hit 2 different nuclear sites in South Africa. It makes you think that they were kind of doing it for some other reason. Don't know what that reason is. But they also detonated another nuclear test in the desert of what is modern day Botswana. And at the time, it was under the control of the apartheid South Africa. And I did want to go over this guy right here. His name is Howard, W-A-L-P-H. He was an American politician, House of Representatives, and was a special envoy to African Great Lakes region during the Clinton administration. He was helped try to end a couple of civil wars over there. He goes on to work at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, which is a very far left entity. He also chaired the subcommittee on Africa in the House Foreign Affairs. And basically, Whoopi, however you say his last name, co-authored and managed the legislation that imposed the sanctions against South Africa by overriding a veto of Ronald Reagan's. Now think about that. So the House and Senate passed legislation that imposed sanctions on South Africa, but President Ronald Reagan vetoed it. Does that make any sense? Why would you veto something that's trying to hold a racist government like South Africa accountable?
Because deals were being made.
It makes no sense to me.
Well, how do you spell that
but
guy's last
because
name
it
again?
it's WOLPE, Wolpe, I guess is how you say it. And he also goes to work for the National Endowment for Democracy. So that tells you everything. But what was interesting to me is he's Jewish. And so he's drafting legislation to create sanctions on South Africa while Israel is secretly dealing with South Africa and basically giving them all of our technology. So it's kind of almost like a what's that word? Like almost like a self-licking ice cream cone. If they can put sanctions on South Africa, it allows Israel to play that role. Where if there was no sanctions on South Africa and everybody was just dealing with them in whatever way they wanted, you know, because we're like the 100-pound elephant in the, or the 1,000-pound elephant in the room. You actually was doing Israel a favor by putting sanctions on South Africa because they became the middleman and could charge a cut of everything that was going on into South Africa, right? I don't know if that's what was going on, but it certainly
You you
ended up
you
looking like that.
you do give them, like, the optics of it, like, they have a formal excuse now to be present and
Correct.
doing that stuff. So,
Correct.
I
So
get that, because now you don't have to really do things under, like, concealment or in, operate in the shadows because you're meeting for these reasons. But, I mean, we
yeah.
know what they're really meeting, what they're really
So
doing.
also, there's a company that I came across called Space Research Corporation. Now, I've come across this before on a completely different research, but this Space Research Corporation was set up by Gerald Bull, and he had worked on a thing called Project HARP, and Project HARP is not what we think it is. It basically was a ballistic capability to shoot satellites basically out of a gun like thing. And this is like the third time I've come across this Project HARP deal. And he was doing it for a joint program for the US and Canada that got cut in 1967.
Was this
And
that? Are you talking about, like, those conspiracy, like, they would call them rail guns because they could shoot into space?
yes, yes,
Okay, I think
yes,
I have it. I have the Project Harp up on the screen because even looking at the picture,
yeah,
this reminds me of, like, the rail guns.
yes, that's what it is. So this is the guy that manufactured them. And it says that his company that he set up after he lost the funding for that HARP was SRC. And it was focused on artillery systems following the supply of arms to South Africa in 1977 in contravention of the UN embargo because it was an apartheid regime. So he basically was part of the apparatus that the US was using to go around the embargo by using Israel. And he actually got in trouble for it and was put in jail as a result of it for like 4 months. Not like a big deal, but yeah. So he was actually working in doing that, and for some reason everybody else didn't get in trouble, but this guy did. Um,
That
for
sounds fishy.
basically going, yes, very fishy. But I also thought it was interesting when you go down and says During the next decade, SRC worked for a number of governments: China, Chile, Taiwan, and South Africa. Now, let me just put in so let me put this in, put your Gladio glasses on for just a second. Chile at the time was ran by a CIA installed dictator. Taiwan at the time was ran by a CIA installed dictator. South Africa was apartheid. And China, we weren't supposed to be doing anything with. So, and their main product was a modified artillery cannon, that howitzer that was specifically for NATO. And NATO runs Operation Gladio. That's crazy. And then it says that this howitzer-based system was paid for by South Africans, but it had been claimed that Bull did the work largely at the urging of the CIA. And we'll get into it later, but there's a whole big thing, because it mentions it in this article, about Angola. Angola, even in the Iran-Contra, comes up of what was going on in Angola. And I have not looked it up. I know just from having, done various history things about generally what went on, but I have not went back and looked at it with my Gladio glasses on. When we move over to Africa and start kind of doing a deep dive on the different countries there, Angola is going to be one of my first ones, because there's so much of CIA, and I know there's diamonds there, and I know there's some other stuff there. So it just ends up being in so many of these different stories dealing with South America, because of the overlap of buying weapons and them. And now that I know why, because Israel's the weapons dealer, and Israel's in bed with South Africa, and Angola was right on South Africa's border, and they're in the same neighborhood. And so whatever was going on there, they didn't want it to be good, because South Africa was still suppressing all of their blacks. And so if Angola was able to establish a stable government and manage itself, it would make South Africa look bad. So they kept trying to create chaos and turmoil there. And that's kind of what I remember of when we went through Air War College, and we went to all the different regions. That's kind of what I remember, is it was in constant turmoil. And now I kind of know why. And now I want to go look at it with all of my new knowledge.
I'll tell you, hearing you say that, and now I look at who just became the president of Mexico, who happens to be on our southern border.
Yeah.
It's
petrifying.
It is. It is.
Yeah. And see, even in this.
Oh, I was just going to tell the crowd, if you guys don't know, I suggest you go start researching the new female president for Mexico and see the interesting ties of where she comes from.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of dumbfounded. Why? How do we not know this? So then go down to the end. It says the company was subsequently reincorporated in Brussels, where Bull managed it for several years, and then he was murdered. And people believe he was murdered by Mossad.
Oh, I just saw. I just read that last sentence. I'm like, holy smokes! Let me bring this on the screen so people could see this.
Yeah.
Oh, where'd it go? There it is. Doesn't want to let me highlight it. What the heck? There we go.
Well, he definitely would know too much.
Oh,
that's just crazy.
Assassins, freaking terrorists. That's what's going on here.
Yeah. And so the article also brings up this organization called UNITA, which is National Union for Total Independence for Angola. And it mentions in there about how it's, you know, basically Cold War proxy war, because it has the same thing as the rest of them, how they're cut off. A good guy gets in, they're cut off. They reach out to you know, the democracy loving people, which all shut them down. So then they have to turn around and ask Cuba and the USSR for help. And then, of course, they're labeled a communist. And they basically were trying to get aid from China, just anybody, because they're going to get beat up. And they know that because, you know, we've already went through how many presidents that this, you know, it's a pattern. And so basically, this whole thing plays out of how it was created and how they tried to fight this guerrilla war. But basically, they're fighting against the United States. But it talks about it being a guerrilla movement, and it says that the guy basically they were getting help from the Heritage Foundation and the Reagan administration. And you're like, oh, but it got even better. And then it says, through the lobbying efforts of Paul Manafort and his team of Black, Manafort, Stone, which is Roger Stone, and Kelly, which was paid $600,000 each year from this guy beginning in 1985. And UNITA gained strong backing from the Reagan administration.
There it is. Yeah. Paul Manafort. What the hell is going on?
I'm telling you, it's just like one after another. And then it says this Savimbi guy gained ground despite the forces aligned against him. American conservatives pointed to his success and that of the Afghan Mujahideen and the Contras, all of which the U.S. supported. But they were all the bad guys. The Mujahideen was the bad guys, and the Nicaraguan Contras were the bad guys. They were not the good guys. Right? So we were, and I don't know, I think we talked about the Chechnya one, right? Where basically the whole Chechnya war or battle that Russia had, the Chechnyan rebels, as they referred to them, was actually imported from the Mujahideen and Al-Qaeda from Afghanistan. They were basically a Gladio cell that they set up in Chechnya to piss off Russia and kill a bunch of Russians. And so you've got here, you know, Mujahideen will travel kind of crap. So this story
it just sounds crazy when you read it. The Mujahideen and the Nicaraguan Contras, all of which with U.S. support were successfully opposing Soviet-sponsored governments. Like,
yeah,
talk about a Jason Bourne
the
movie.
U.S. support was actually the CIA support. And now we know with a bunch of Israeli weapons. So let me get back to this this article, because there was a couple other points that I had highlighted. Let me get to my highlights. Let's see. I'm probably going to have to.
Man, I feel like I need to go listen to my Bob Marley music over again. I feel like I got to go watch the movie Blood Diamond again. It just, I bet
Blood
you
Diamond, I definitely think would probably. So listen to this. Early in this century, South African Jews began to lobby leaders of the South African government to persuade them to intercede on behalf of Zionism and this is like a long time ago, with the British government, which controlled the fate of Palestine. This is like back in the early 1900s. At the request of Theodor Herzl, who is the guy that basically set up Zionism, considered the founder of Zionism, the South African approached Cecil Rhodes, who, if you remember, was the guy that was at the round table of the Fabian Society in Gladio 1. The Cape Colony premier, who basically Rhodesia is named after, and took personal responsibility for extending Britain's grasp on Africa, and other prominent figures. In 1916, approached to General Jan Smuts, SMUTS, who would later lead the South African government, bore spectacular fruit. As a member of the British War Cabinet, Smuts supported the drafting of the 1917 Balfour Agreement, which set up the Jewish homeland in Palestine. Through the years, though, the British commitment to the declaration wavered. Smuts' support never did. He consistently maintained that the strategic safety of Britain's main line of imperial communication through the Suez Canal would be best assured if there was a British-sponsored Jewish homeland adjacent to it. When the Balfour Declaration was being drafted, his immediate suggestion was to find a formula to which the great powers would agree for staking British claims to the main role in the future of a post-war Palestine to cooperate with the Jews. In London, Smuts befriended Sham Weizmann, who would become Israel's first president. In 1943, Weizmann wrote a memo to Smuts outlining a plan to develop industry and agriculture in Africa and the Middle East capable of competing with the U.S. industry. The scheme was of great importance, Weizmann stressed, and it is doubtful whether there exists any other scheme of equal importance to the future of the British Empire. So you get the distinct. What?
I'll say, talk about going back to the root of the problem here.
Yeah. So you get the distinct impression that the long-term vision back in the early 1900s, when they were creating the concept of Zionism, because it didn't exist before that, by this Fabian Society round table, Cecil Rhodes crowd, that the colony at the time of South Africa, which obviously was from Britain, and the implanting of Israel in a strategic location, which they had control over, of where it was. And it wasn't just where it is today, was not the only place that was considered. There were other places actually considered at the time. And so you can see clearly in their own words that one of the reasons why they wanted it there, if you look on a map as to how you get from South Africa and the logistical criticalness of where the West and East Indies Company that the British had at the time, and not only the British, but the Netherlands, Belgium, because they were all empires at the time. They had colonies everywhere. The Suez Canal was huge. And so if you have somebody there that can, on a dime, create chaos in the Middle East for you on your behalf, it does give you a huge amount of power. And who do they owe allegiance to except for the people that basically were responsible for their creation? Right?
It's the ones that give them the power, so that they're not going to bite the hand that essentially feeds them. And then,
correct.
It's not bringing it up here. Let me try. Well, here, let me bring up the image of South Africa first, so I can at least share that one with you guys. And then there's a very interesting one. So I'll bring this one up just to give people a look at it. Shows Johannesburg, but just kind of shows Cape Town, just kind of put the visual there so everybody can see. Now the other one, it won't download, so I'm just going to try to bring it up on the screen to show you guys this way. But this kind of shows the importance of that Suez Canal right there.
Yeah. So the Suez Canal, you have on the west bank of it, you have Egypt. And then on the east bank, you have Israel. So it's critical.
That's a big deal right there.
Yeah, it's huge.
That is a big deal.
Because where's India?
Right over here.
Correct.
You can see my cursor.
And India was a British colony as well. So you see,
you have to be able to. Yeah, you have to be able to traverse the Suez Canal because look at the distance to go the other way around through the line. It's just
correct. Yeah, and that's why they basically the British Empire took over Yemen. And that's why Yemen has so much problems today. They've got Gladio in there too. They've got all of the terror cells there because the British basically destabilized that. Remember, I think we were talking about them stealing the coffee trees from Yemen.
It sounds familiar.
Yemen,
sounds familiar.
And Yemen is right at the southern end of the Suez Canal. So, and that's the problem right now is with the Yemeni military attacking the different ships coming into the Suez Canal. It's destabilized that entire area where if you don't want to be subject to the Yemeni attacks, you got to go around the Horn of Africa or the southern tip of Africa.
You know, you look at, like you said, the Balfour Act, you look at the guy that started Zionism, you look at all these ties back to the British. And I've always told people that, yes, it's all eyes on Mossad, all eyes on the Israeli intel, all eyes on the Israeli government. But who created them? Yes.
And it's not just this. There's so much of this that, I mean, just like the attempted coup on Trump with Russiagate, it was all born out of London. The setup of George Papadopoulos, all of that stuff, all happened in London because MI6 and MI5 is they're kissing cousins with the CIA as far as all of this is concerned. They're two peas in the same pod.
So, I mean, put me on the tracks if I'm not tracking here, Colonel. But I just feel like the Crown is, we're proper and we're drinking our tea with our pinkies out over here. But all this chaos that's taking place over here in the Middle East, all this, we're facilitating it. The Crown is doing it. So, I mean, people go back to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and you go even farther back than that. I knew it.
The Rothschilds. It is the Rothschilds that created the Bank of England. Back in the day, they basically took over the country by taking over the bank and the money supply. And I mean, if I'm not mistaken, that was like hundreds of years ago that they did that. Basically the English royalty was taken over by basically the whole movement. The House of Windsor is actually from Germany, not England. And the whole turnover there of how that came about. So whether or not you're looking, and you go back to that whole original concept that we talked about in part 1, where you have the Pan-American Empire, you have the Pan-British Empire, the Pan-European, And they actually had a discussion where they did not want the British empire to remain. They wanted British to be part of the pan-Europe concept, but Britain would not subjugate themselves to Germany's control. And therefore, they left the kind of compromise among themselves was that you would leave the pan-British Empire and then have a separate pan-Europe. But the trade-off was then you had to redefine Europe to go to the Ural Mountains, which basically eliminates Russia. And so half of Russia goes into pan-Europe and half of Russia goes into pan-Asia, which is why you got to get rid of Putin so that you can get rid of Russia, which is what we're doing right now. So it still, even though it may have been talked about and the idea at least 140 years ago, it's still playing out today. It's like that magic hand up here as the puppet master, still trying to bring all of that about. And I just am firmly convinced that the election of Donald Trump derailed all of that.
So this is the end game for one side or the other.
Correct.
We're there.
Correct.
So Putin.
That's what it feels like.
So now one would have to go back and remember all those, iconic, media moments of Trump with Putin, Trump with Xi. Trump. Now that this makes more sense, where it's like, listen, fellas, some shit's gonna go down. This election in 2020 is not going to work out the way the world probably wants it to work out. But y'all need to keep your finger off them nuclear buttons that they want, because it
does feel like that.
I just feel like I just added a lens to my Gladio glasses right now. I'm just like,
they're windshield wipers.
It's like my brain just played Plinko. It's like all the pieces. It's like I see, like, holy smokes, like I was seeing, but now I see, and it's just like, okay, I'm tracking.
And people who believe that in order for most people to understand the significance of how evil these people are, is that you have to show them the edge of the cliff. And as uncomfortable as that is, I definitely think we're getting closer and closer to the cliff. I don't think we're going over the cliff, but I definitely think we're very close.
I think another thing, whether intentional, but I think it's a positive consequence. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but these times are also going to show us the leaders that we need for all these nations, specifically ours. This is where we live, but we're going to realize, these politicians were all puppets. And you know what? That mom running from the school district, and that guy that owns a contracting company that took time to go and, be to keep eyes on the voting things. Like, I think we are starting to see, like, we're separating the leaders from the sheep.
Our priorities have changed.
100%. And I think you need that too, because you can't if you just fix things and it's too easy, we forget.
Correct.
And
absolutely.
And like you said earlier, when we're talking about it's just debt, like this is the end game, and it's our children and our grandchildren that are either going to reap the benefits of freedom or suffer the consequences of Marxism and all this crazy stuff that they want. Like, this is it.
Yeah, they've stolen our wealth. And it has went everywhere, all over the world, and not for good. It has created chaos and dead bodies all over the world. And the sooner we understand that and stand up against it, and peacefully non-comply, the sooner we change it.
It's got to get uncomfortable. And now that we know the arms dealing that's coming into, our neighbors to the south, it's just, Man, this is it. It seems like a mess to me, but looking at it from the perspective of the bad guy, I got to give it to them. What a well orchestrated plan!
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
holy smokes!
And they kept it relatively hidden. What's really weird about that, just like what you were pulling up some of those articles, it's all out there. It's just you didn't have the skeleton to put it on. Now we have the skeleton, so we know exactly where to hang it on the tree. And that's, to me, is what made the difference for me. I had all of these little pieces of information, but none of it seemed like it even related to each other. And now that I have like the skeleton, I know exactly where it goes on the tree in order to be able to put the whole piece together.
The biggest thing for me has been seeing the same players to hear. I mean, essentially, it's like what you're saying, but it's
Yeah.
because the way I saw it before was just like, oh, there's just all these conflicts that are always taking place in the world because of this
Yes.
and because of this. And that's just natural to that area because it's always been that way. But then when you see these same players that are involved here,
Same
involved there,
ambassador, same CIA people, same military generals, same everything.
then it's just like, hold on, hold on. Wait,
Yeah.
what? Then it's like,
Right.
when you have this many similar variables, then we're not talking.
It's
This is coordinated.
not random.
Eh,
Right.
hell no, it's not random. And then it's just
Yeah.
like you keep going back and you keep going back. And I think the biggest thing that people are going to have to, and this probably won't resonate too well with a lot of people, but it's okay. I'm always just going to fire the truth from the hip and let it land where it lands. Is I know there are a lot of people that want to say that, this is just on Israel. But if you paid attention to tonight's show, there's a curtain behind that curtain. And if you're truly after who's the they, who's the them, then you got to
Correct.
acknowledge this goes deeper than Israel.
Correct. It definitely does. And that's kind of why, again, I go back to that very first show. That's why I came up with the word international syndicate, because everybody has a knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, it's the Rothschilds, or oh, it's Israel, or oh, it's all of the Jewish people, or oh, it's the Catholic Jesuits. No, no, it's a whole group of people, and they are not of any one religion, unless you want to call Satan a religion. And because you have to be satanic evil in order to want to achieve an agenda that ends up with billions of dead bodies. And that's literally what they're doing. So it's not any one religion, because every religion has people in it that are innocent. So you can't do that. And the whole thing about none of this could happen if you didn't have the corporate in part of it either, the oligarchs, the international businesses. It is that are controlling all of the resources for this syndicate,
That's why I
right?
said it's
It
near
takes every
perfection.
piece of it. Yeah.
It's near perfection, Colonel.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
like you said, you're controlling the governments, you're controlling the banking, you're controlling the media, you're controlling the educational institutions. You even got it to the point where, look over here with what the crown is doing. So everybody focuses on Israel, but there's this layer of protection that even if you try to expose it there, then you're labeled as anti-Semitic to even prevent the digs into what's going on there, because digging there will ultimately lead you to who's the they, who's the them. I mean, it is near perfection. They just could not account for one thing, and that was the truth seekers.
Yeah.
People like you that were like, I'm gonna dig. Me and my team are gonna dig, and, and hmm,
Yeah. And there's so many people out there that have been doing this for such a long time. Um, I just think it helps having that outline, which I think is what was missing in the past. Is everybody did such a great job of doing one spoke, not realizing it was on a wheel. because all of the people that are focused, not that this is a bad thing, because it's not, on the whole blackmail and Jeffrey Epstein stuff, that's just the grease in the middle of the wheel.
And that is not the only operation like that that's taking place.
Correct. Mark Dutroux and all of those others. But even if you took all of them combined, it's still just the grease. It's the thing that makes it move. But you have the arms and the human trafficking and the drug trafficking that funds the entire thing. And so every piece of that wheel is needed in order to make the wheel roll down the road. And I don't think most people who focus on just one part of that, for the audience wants to see the wheel. And then they know when Liz Croton is talking about Jeffrey Epstein, she's talking about this part of it. And when I think it was Joe Lang that did the Denostris reveal in 2019, where they took down the whole, he's talking about this spoke of it. And then somebody else, like tonight, we talk about the weapons spoke of it. You can at least focus in on where we're at on that. If you have a visual, that's the way my brain works. And most people, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard if you just get random reveals. But if the reveals come and you know exactly where to put them on the dartboard, you can make the outline of what the actual Operation Gladio thing is. And that's what I think we needed that outline.
Agreed. And you know who else agrees? Call sign Cujo does, with a $5 Rumble rant that says, Alpha and Colonel, thank you. Appreciate this series bigly. Y'all have enlightened so many. Thank you for your hard work. And thank you guys for spending time with us to listen and get educated along with me, because I'm getting educated. I mean, y'all saw the lights turn on this Marine tonight, which is just, it is, I get excited, but then it just makes me nervous, because that's the way my brain works. It starts. So if you guys haven't heard me say it enough, I'm an operational guy. It's what I did. I planned operations. So the second I get this intel, my brain starts formulating what my operation needs to look like based off the operation I know they're doing. And it just gets really loud up here, really, really fast. Because then I start thinking, like, one of the things I was thinking about 90 seconds ago as you were talking was, I was like, General Flynn started talking about information warfare in the book. And then all of a sudden, information warfare became a, talking point. And then they started talking about artificial intelligence. And then all of a sudden we started getting Grok and ChatGPT and all this. I was like, they've always just been ahead of it. And this next book is the role of the church. So is it what I want, which is like the exposure of the churches? Or is it something that's going to be more chaotic, which is the exposure of the churches that's going to leave a vacuum? And I mean, people really rely on their faith for direction in times of chaos. And we are on the brink of chaos.
But what I will tell you is the role of the church in the bad things will reveal the bad players, not necessarily the institutions themselves, as far as not everybody in them are bad. But the parts that are bad needs to be dealt with. And so much of this has a religious aspect to it. When we did the Jim Jones thing, it was through that church, the Unification Church of the Moonies, that was paramilitary capabilities down in Paraguay and Uruguay, right? They actually sent Gladio operators down there to police the drug fields. So there are entire church apparatuses that have been corrupted, if not originally set up as a ploy. They weren't churches at all. Jim Jones's was never a church. It was a CIA MK Ultra experiment. And that same guy set up the guy that Jim Jones modeled that church after. I just did a post on that today. Also set up a thing in I want to say it was Chile, and it was called Colonnade Davidin. And that religious organization, started out as an orphanage in Germany where he was procuring kids under the guise of a orphanage and basically renting them out. And he was abusing the children. When they started investigating him in Germany, he took that entire operation to Chile and put it on a compound that was basically like Jonestown in Guyana. It was a terrorist training camp. It had weapons stored in the basement, and the basement was also used as a torture chamber. And so those, again, it was basically set up as a religious order. There was 3 other ones. One was in Kenya, and I forget where the other 2 were, but they were all inspired by one man under the guise of a religion, and they were never a religion. And so there's definitely going to be some exposure as this all comes out.
Well, I have no doubt in that. And we got another awesome Rumble rant that came in from Crim KR, and $50 Rumble says, "Thank you, hugs, and much aloha." And I always wonder, so if you don't mind, KR and KR, did you mean to put aloha, or were you trying to do alpha? Because every time I do alpha, sometimes it auto corrects me and puts aloha. So I'm just curious. That aloha is cool, especially with the hearts and the 100. I mean, freaking awesome. Freaking, I mean, the information to learn it is awesome. Not the actual acts that are taking
Right.
place. I don't want anybody to be, what the hell's wrong with you, Alpha? Not talking about that. I'm just saying,
This is wonderful.
it's just, I love the chaos. Just let's just do more nuke testing, and secret islands and oceans and crazy stuff like that. Before we get to final thoughts, and I want you to let everybody know where to find you, I do want to bring something on the screen, because this has been super cool, and I'm getting positive feedback because it is a new partnership, you guys. So allow me 30 seconds for you guys. If you have your little 4-legged kids that are furry and have wagging tails, you guys, Pet Club 24/7, links down in the description, alphawarriorshow.petclub247. This thing is freaking awesome. You guys are buying all these cool little biscuits for the health of your animals. I mean, if you go and you read the testimonials, there are some crazy awesome things that people are having unfold for the health of their furry friends. However, it doesn't just stop there, you guys. And let's do the aw, right? That somehow
that looks like my baby. Who just woke up from the floor.
I need a big dog. Like, I need a dog that's like, leaves me all drooled and I need a big dog.
Buddy.
And I, Labradors and boxers. But for the rest of us that don't have tails, maybe we are still furry, right, fellas? You go down a shop, and when you're in shop, you go and you click on humans, and here are the healthy things for you guys with these immune support things. Once again, go read the testimonials. There are some insane things that are happening for people's health. As a matter of fact, this week I'm going to be interviewing a guest that we're talking his cancer disappeared. And you're not going to hear the words from me. You're going to hear the words from him. And I believe it'll be either this coming week or the week after that we'll have that show. So you guys, once again, Pet Club 24/7, links down in the description, alphawarriorshow.petclub247. Help your health, help your pet's health. Look at that guy. He's like, "What's up, Alpha? I heard you talking about healthy biscuits and stuff." He's like, "Where's my connection, man?"
You look just like that puppy you had on there.
Let me go back there. Let's see. Let's see. There we go. There we
go. See?
I can feel all the energy in the chat right now. Oh, there it is, you guys. Links down in the description.
We had to get him up off the bed.
100%. The other thing, you guys, too, if you already bought it, and even if you want to keep it private, I will keep your story private. But I would like to know your guys' results. I know there's people dealing with rosacea, how do you say it? Where your skin turned red. I know there's people with psoriasis that are going to be taking it. There's some people with kidney issues. I have a cousin with cancer that I'm trying to, kind of coerce them into taking this. I don't know. Big Pharma has just really kept a lot from us, and it just seems like there's all these people that are kind of being like, let's take on the FDA and see how the cards fall, and well, we'll see how the cards fall. But
Yeah.
that's our commercial now, and now I'll bring it back to you, Colonel, because you are all over the place on X. It's if I'm like, does she sleep? Like, what's going on? I just want to make sure that Mr. Colonel knows I didn't start all that. That wasn't me. Okay.
He knows.
So,
Yeah, he has to live with me. He knows. I do want to say that thanks to Bridget reaching out to several of the USS Liberty survivors, that we're going to try to interview a few of them. And so I'm going to try to work on that. We've reached out to him. I did get to talk to one of them today. And I'm going to touch base with him next week, because what I want to do is basically share what you and I did on the 2 Liberty shows, and then be able to give them some exposure and get their side of the story. But I also want to share with them what I found, because and since I was last on here, I did do another thread on Crypto AG, which was like the longest one I've ever done, and found out that there was over 100 countries that had that encryption software. If you remember that whole story, that was the server that was located on the base in Panama next to the School of Americas that was doing all the eavesdropping. So the CIA and the Germany had basically co-bought this company and sold it to all of these countries, and the salespeople in the company didn't know that it was compromised. There was a back door. So every cable, anything that went from a government to their embassies throughout the entire world was being read by the CIA for decades and decades and decades. Like from the early 50s until, and then I found an article that says, do you know who undid it all? The company's gone. Trump.
really?
It just went away in 2018 and 19. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that next time, because that's a very interesting story. Yeah, because that definitely needs to be highlighted.
Yeah, I'm like, gears started turning on that one, because I want to start.
Yeah.
Timing's everything. How was it talking to one of the survivors today? That must have just been.
It was awesome. We're going to do a Zoom call, because again, the part that I don't think that they may know, like, he'd never heard of Operation Gladio. So I want to tell them what that is and let them know that they basically were in the middle of a regime change in Egypt, which basically was the whole, and for them to understand the scale of what has gone on. You know what I mean? You think, oh, that was just like one thing. No, there's been over 80 of them. And, and the role that Crypto AG played in that, because the entire time that was going on, Egypt was one of the customers. Jordan was one of the customers. So the CIA knew the entire time what was going on there. They knew that there was no chance at all of Egypt attacking Israel, and yet they allowed Israel to attack Egypt. So, yeah, it's just crazy.
It is crazy. So now, because this time I remembered, so I'm going to bring it up on the screen. There we go. Let's go over some of the comments from our last show, and then we'll call it a night. So let me bring this up on the screen. Let me make it bigger. Let's make it kind of easy for everybody to see. And not so many you slackers, so you guys better get back on it. So let's start with the person that got in there first. Coffee Tea Alpha brings the real information. We have been lied to and used for years. That's the absolute truth. Gadget Gal comes in, says, isn't Maine trying to do ranked voting? I thought there was another state talking of ranked voting.
So California does it and Alaska does it too.
I didn't know we did that in California. I was like, what? Because I remember when you said that. Let's see. Coolwant says, you all should find someone to make Gladio glasses. Yes, Colonel. Great show. Thanks. Blessings to you. Would be such a freaking fire selling item for sure.
I know. I'm trying.
Regina Matthews says, Alpha, where's your hearing at? I'll be praying on it, and we have your back. Southern California, the Indio Superior Court, which falls within Riverside County. You guys go check out SITREP from last week. I did provide a lot of details on there. Let's see. Adam Rain, this is so bizarre, but the truth should always be told. Thank you, Alpha, and special thanks for the Colonel for bringing the bombs. Love and prayers for you both. And then let's see. Catherine the Great. OMG, Alpha read one of my comments live. I feel so special. Love you, Colonel and Alpha. And guess what? Just read another one. So send more love. We absolutely love it. Let's scroll up here a little bit. Let's get to Jesus the One. Same players, shows. There are really not very many of them. Same operations all over the world, which means the past proves the present, but not the future. There are more of us than them, and we are being educated on their schemes. It's ending here, and it's ending now. Jesus the One, I like that. Let's see, and I think, let's go right here. All right. Jan 3777, CIA created who? Can you comment on this, please? Oh, Colonel?
Created what?
Created the WHO, World Health Organization.
I don't know that I've ever said that. I don't know that they created the WHO. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I've never heard that either. And if I'm looking at the rank structure, I think the WHO would be more involved with the creation or the helping the creating of the actual CIA within the United States. I don't know. I would have to go look at when the WHO was organized, what year that happened. And let's see. Let's get up here. All right, Kuwan dropped a lot, so let's go to this one, and we'll go to two more after this. So,
oh my goodness, that one's huge.
Yeah, China was the 55th country in the global network of Bank of Credit and Commerce International (BCCI), and the second international bank that established a branch in China's Shenzhen Special Economic Zone with a dedicated management training development center, and played a modest part in the implementation of the reform and open door policy of China with a link. You got anything to say to that? That was a lot. All right.
Yeah, I can guarantee you, because the BCCI was a front bank, that they were either spying on China. There's something that's weird about China. And this whole thing, just like we found out with Taiwan, and there's something really weird about Iran too. It isn't what it appears. I've not come to the conclusion as to what it is, but it isn't what it appears.
I agree. I feel like, especially with Iran and China, I almost feel like they're fighting the same fight they were fighting. Like there's these internal conflicts of, good and the bad guys trying to get control of those countries. And then our last two, let's see, CACREBS 43. This is a question I came up with while driving home from California today along the I-8 near the border wall, which made me think of Operation Gladio. I don't remember if this has been covered in any of the shows. Were the plane hijackings that occurred in the 1970s part of Operation Gladio? Before that, we could go right out to the gates to see people off to returning at the airports. No metal detectors.
So some of them are. Not all of them were. It's definitely something that when we get to Europe and the Middle East, that will come up more often in some of the exposures that, to be frank, I have not got to the Middle East, but just on the cursory. I mean, we haven't exposed it. But there have been a couple that's been pointed out. Almost all of the plane crashes have been Operation Gladio, that I've come across. MH17. There was one that I read today when I was preparing for this that happened, and I think it was Mozambique, back in the 80s, had their president or prime minister, with whatever they call it, murdered in a plane crash over South Africa. That was basically that he was taken out. And so I do know the whole Antibes hijacking was not at all what we were told it was, where Bibi Netanyahu's older brother Yanni was killed. The one guy that was killed in the entire operation, kind of like they just had a rescue of hostages where only one kid.
Don't get me started on that one. No, me and Ken were talking about that. So you guys go on X, all right? First, if you're not on X, why not get in the trenches of this information fight, you guys? And then once you're on X, go follow my brother at CanCon. Okay, he put a phenomenal thread together. I retweeted it yesterday on some things that were missing from the rescue helicopter, like side guns,
like the guns. It's a Black Hawk. Come on. It's got to have guns if you're going into a hostile environment. I mean, the guys that we flew on when I was deployed to Iraq, and again, I'd never been on a helicopter before. You heard my whole story. The guys, the gunners, are like, I mean, they're so dope. It ain't even funny. Hanging out, they're tethered. And so they're like parallel with the ground, man. I've never seen anything like it. I was so impressed. Don't tell anybody in the Army I said that, but totally impressed. Those Black Hawk guys, twice had those guys, the pilots, totally amazing. We were within inches of a Chinook because a dumb Marine guy that was the ATC guy on at Zaku cleared us to land when his buddy had cleared a Chinook to take off, and the Chinook blades missed the belly of our aircraft by like 2 inches. But those helicopter guys, that gunner told him he's hanging out parallel as we're coming down landing, because we had Iraqi soldiers around our compound. So they're always hanging out with their guns. And he's the one that saw the Chinook come up. And if it wasn't for that gunner and the pilot, I mean, he said bank left, we bank left and barely missed it. So they're amazing.
And I said this comment when you said it then. I'm going to say it again because it's so impressive. The relationship of trust between the pilot and the gunner, to not look, just knowing. No. He said bank left, bank left.
Bank, yeah. I mean, split second.
I wonder if people understand like that kind of relationship. That's
I don't think you can until you see it play out. And the same thing happened when we were going over the Euphrates. We were going about 120 miles an hour, and they put guide wires across to take the rotors off the helicopters. I mean, it was actually a setup, and the pilot, I mean, and you know, you're in a wooded area, you're on water, which depth perception totally screws everything up, which is why they do it. And you just got a metal cable stretched across there. But he saw the poles, saw the cable, and was able to bank up, and we got over the thing. But, you know, it was like, yeah. And the general always flew with the doors open. So any of that crap, if you weren't strapped in, you're gone. You're out the side of the helicopter, because they're up and banked, and you know, yeah, it was crazy.
You'd be swimming with the crocodiles of the Euphrates.
You definitely would have been.
Or is it alligators? I forget which one.
I don't know.
One of the
crocodiles is saltwater. The Euphrates, I'm going to say, is not saltwater. So
big green monster with teeth that rolls, that you don't want. So the last question, and I have a feeling this will probably turn into a show at one point. This comes from Neocon, says, where does the Q Anon movement fit into Operation Gladio? You want to throw a little fastball at that one, Colonel?
Um, Actually, if you go back, and this has been in the back of my mind because it probably um, needs to happen at some point. Having went through all of the Q drops just inquisitively at one point, um, not knowing all of that I know about Operation Gladio now, my feeling then as it is now is the whole impetus of Q was to teach people how to research and to train them how to be civilian intelligence NCOs. So we send people to tech schools when they enlist in order to teach them a skill. What Q was doing was teaching civilians basically how to be what I would refer to as an intel airman at the entry level. And once you work your way through that and you learn how to use all of those tools, whether it's archive.org or TenEye or whatever, and you know what are valid websites and what aren't, and you get so once you have those skills, you are all here as part of that. It gives you a thirst for knowledge. There was things that were exposed on there that no one knew. Basically whetting your appetite in order for you to go do your own research. Understanding that there was so much more out there, I began doing my own research. And that inspiration led to the exposure from my perspective of Operation Gladio and everybody that's watching. And so that to me is what the whole purpose of it was. It's not like it's going to and I do know people like that do an awesome job, like Stormy Patriot Joe and Absolute Conviction 1776 and all of those people. They understand that whole thing, having lived through it and all of the nuances. I don't profess to be that person, but I do think that it has some takeaway for everyone, and that is, don't trust anybody, do your own research. And as I tell everybody, that's the reason why I spell people's last names, because I've had so many people tell me I don't listen to a show of yours without a pencil and a paper, because I do want to go check cross the T's and dot the I's. Yes, exactly. And those things teach you. And that's the reason they're like, how do you remember all that stuff? Because I've looked every single thing up. I don't say it unless I have verified it like 5 different ways. Every book that I read, I go through every single footnote in it. I want to know what book they got it out of. Then I go look up that author. I find out what else they've written, what they said about whatever other topics that they were talking about, so that I feel confident when I bring something to you that in fact it's the truth. And then I love, like what we did today, because we've already talked about United Fruit and we'd already talked about Columbia and all that other stuff, to be able to go, look, there's a lawsuit. It said everything that I told you was true.
When you
So,
get when you get those things that bring vindication to what you're talking about, that is such an awesome feeling. To Stormy Joe and Absolute and so many of these anons out there, they just have different eyes in their head. Like I picture those dudes like the movie in the Matrix when Keanu just sees, ones and zeros and greens. Like
yeah,
that's just the way those guys work.
right. And that, yeah. And my background obviously is military. So I see things from a military perspective, which they don't share. And it's all of us as a team, all of us holding hands, all of us sharing information, that's going to get us to the finish line.
The thing that's been really cool for me, Colonel, is one, I rely heavily on a lot that I got from the military. But the part of law enforcement, people would probably think it's the operational planning. And yes, those are all very important things. But I think the one thing that has probably been the biggest assistant for me was 14 years. You deal with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. You learn human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you learn what gets people to understand, because that's what it comes down to. We call it verbal judo. Like, you got to learn in seconds how to communicate with somebody to make sure that, whatever it is that's going on comes out the way you want it to. And it comes with
Correct.
communication and understanding. We're psychiatrists and secretaries with guns. That's what cops
So
are.
that's kind of obviously being in the military did for me, especially starting off on the enlisted ranks and being in a career field where I was the only female in the entire unit. You know what I mean? So you learn a completely different setting. I grew up my dad was a truck driver, and we were all women in my whole life up for 18 years. And then I go to the exact opposite of that environment for the next at least 8 years when I was in aircraft maintenance. And then, you obviously, the higher in rank you go, the more thousands of people. You've got young airmen, you've got NCOs, you've got junior officers working for you, and you basically learn people. I had some kind of anecdotal things about, I could put, and I when I would go to the senior NCO academy and give speeches, I would tell people that you can put people into 3 buckets. I won't go into the buckets, but those types of things, we'll talk about that next time. But it is how you process information, and how you can't deal with people the same way because everybody's different. They kind of have similar attributes. Like, again, I come up over 30 years with kind of 3 buckets of people, and I had different methodologies in dealing with people that were in each of those things, because you can't treat people exactly the same. They motivate differently. They appreciate things differently. And, in the military, you don't have money to give them. The motivation comes from completely different things, and you have to learn what they are, and you have to learn the people in order to be able to optimize the unit. And so I think all of that has helped me do what we're doing today.
Absolutely. So, Colonel, where can people find you? What are you working on? I know you touched on it a little bit, but let's make sure people can get to your stuff.
So I'm at Substack, at the Colonel's Corner. I'm at Rumble at the Colonel's Corner, and on X at Colonel Towner, on True Social at Colonel Watkins. And tomorrow, Gladio primer is coming out on Badlands Media. It's my first article on Badlands tomorrow.
That is what I'm talking about.
It's just basically a 101 if you wanted to share with someone that doesn't know anything about Gladio. It'll be something that you can link to and give them and say, here it is in a nutshell.
That is freaking... You guys better go. Y'all better share it. I'm serious. You guys, I had fun tonight. I love doing these live shows. I miss it so much. Do us a solid on the way out, you guys. Smash that like button, share it with somebody. And if you haven't subscribed, you slacker, make sure you subscribe. All the links to follow Colonel down in the description, the commercials, the ads, the sponsors, everybody. Help support the people that support this show, you guys. I'm in the fight. Colonel's in the fight. First in, last out. I'll catch you guys the next time. Semper Fi, and God bless everybody.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing our loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need